Hello again, walking fans. Welcome to walk 49 of the 54 legs of the mighty Southwest Coast Path. Although in reality, this was the second ever walk that Andy and I did. So we were relative novices, and so was my filmmaking. My video skills in the early part of the whole adventure were in need of some attention, I guess. And you'll see why from this first clip. Yeah, wind noise, bit of a problem, huh? So I think I've upped my game since then, but I had a lot of quite poor footage from this particular day. In fact, I gave up towards the end of the day because I was not inspired by the scenery, which is unusual for me. So hence some studio footage. Steve in the cave for a change, spliced in with the live footage of our actual walk back in May 2021. So we'd already made our debut on the coast path on the north coast between Minehead and high up onto Exmoor in a pretty full-on first ever walk. So second walk, not quite as full-on, but we did a decent distance, the best part of 17 miles, and glorious it was too. Certainly the cliff top part of it, although I'll come to the Shingle slog in due course. So we're both down in Dorset with our wives for the week, staying separately but nearby in Eype, and we both thought it would be rude not to try and do a few bits of the coast path whilst we were down here. So we did, and this walk is one of them. Gloriously, we could both walk out of our front doors, and we met at the finger post down on the beach at Eype and headed immediately uphill towards Bridport. The previous evening, Emma and I had already visited the beach and I'd taken some photographs of the cliff because I wanted to show everybody the Eype Mouth Fault, and here it is in all its glory. Magnificent, isn't it? Well, the tan-coloured rocks on the left-hand side of the photograph, they're Jurassic sand, silts, clays, and some limestones mixed in there as well, and to the right more of the same, but a different age and a much lighter colour, as you can see. Separating the two is a big fault, the Eype Mouth Fault, which back in the Jurassic and into the Cretaceous period, so 150 or so million years ago, this fault was active. It was causing earthquakes. Fortunately, no more earthquakes, but what you do get are these terrible mudslides. That massive dark material there has come down from that part of the cliff called Fault Corner, and it's a relatively recent mudslide, and it's actually blocked the beach off, and that's typical of this stretch of the coast. Anyway, the four of us, Andy, myself, Emma and Boots, slogged up West Cliff, or the Watting Cliff, and I talked quite a bit about the geology, and I have to pay tribute to the incredible Doctor of Geology at Southampton University back in the day, Dr. Ian West, and his remarkable field guides which he puts up free online. So big respect to you, Ian, in your marvellous and detailed work with your generations of students that you introduced to sedimentary geology and structures on this classic bit of coastline. Got to the top of the cliff, looked inland to Hyden's End where Andy and Hills were staying, with a glorious view of Thorncombe Beacon from their gaff. Strode on a little bit further, I pointed out the little valley that marks the inland expression, the surface expression of the Eype Mouth Fault. Brilliant little exercise for geological mapping skills. And we said farewell to Emma and Boots, and Andy and I ploughed on downhill towards West Bay, the port of Bridport. Bridport is known, of course, by Thomas Hardy fans as Port Bredy, and by television fans as Broadchurch, David Tennant and all that. Andy and Hills, big aficionados of that programme. I never watched an episode, but I enjoyed very much Andy's telling of tales about being here when filming was taking place and being told to bugger off the set because they'd ruined the continuity. There you go. I also thought a bit about Bridport and its history of rope making. And apparently the reason why the main street is so wide, a little bit like Chipping Sodbury near to where we live, although it wasn't for rope making reasons in Chipping Sodbury, but similarly wide high street. And it was for the ropes to be laid out to dry out before they were sold. What you never wanted to know about though really was the Bridport dagger. And that's a euphemism, a rather macabre one, for the rope used by the hangmen back in the day. So Bridport came and went. I thought about children I went to primary school with who came here on summer holidays, West Bay. And I thought too about the geography I'd learnt about Chesil Beach, and Andy and I sampled the shingle on the beach at this end, which is pea-sized pebbles. They get bigger the further east you go. And the wind was absolutely howling at this point. And off we strode. So up the famous East Cliff at Bridport. On many a seaside postcard, the Golden Stone, the Bridport Sands, a lot of that in the Cotswolds. And it's a very distinctive rock type, very unstable cliff face, and there's rock falls here every year, and it's dangerous. Do not go near it, folks, at the bottom, and certainly don't go near it at the cliff edge at the top. And we didn't. The wind was howling. The golf links on the cliff top were pretty sparsely populated. We spotted one solitary golfer hacking his way around. If you couldn't keep the ball low on a day like this, you really couldn't play that infernally frustrating game. On we strode, and in time came back down towards the beach as we neared Burton Bradstock, another handsome little town. Burton Bradstock has a big caravan camp, freshwater beach. We walked through that. Andy reminisced about Hilary's childhood and how she came here on many an occasion. Burton Bradstock stands in my mind as a place I once got stranded on a geology field trip I was leading. And the minibus I had was absolutely rubbish. It was an old commer van, and it kept on breaking down. And I ended up in a repair garage on a big bend in the road in Burton Bradstock. And the students were delighted not to be doing any geology. Little did they know, because the garage was cut into an old quarry in the Bridport Sands. And so we didn't waste any time. I got them doing sketches and graphic logs at that location. They loved it, really. So Burton Bradstock came and went. Up onto Burton Cliff we went. It was our last cliff of the day, and I was sad to come down the far side, because I knew from here on in for some distance we'd have a slog along Chesil Beach. The Shingle slog. And merciless it was too. But on we went, and it had to be done. It was a question of just get this job done, lads. We could see our quarry in the distance, which was a lunch stop at West Bexington, and we strode on. I enjoyed very much the wildlife, the incredible plants that grow in this hostile terrain, unstable surface, no water, salt obviously, howling wind. Yeah, life thrives, and it's pretty marvellous. I enjoyed too the big cowpats. They're actually bits of ripped up lagoon mud, old lagoon mud that once extended much further out to sea than currently is the case. As sea levels rose after the Ice Age, the shingle gets washed inland, and what was once the lagoon gets buried by the advancing shingle. The waves can then get at the old lagoon mud that was once the bottom of a fresh salt water or brackish water lagoon, rips it all up in the storms and chucks it in great chunks onto the beach. So I enjoyed seeing them very much, and if you look carefully you'll see small snail shells in there, so typical of the brackish water environment. So we plodded on Chesil Beach, we plodded along. Andy followed me closely, trying to match my steps. He had this theory that if he walked exactly where I'd walked, the shingle would be a little bit firmer because of my excessive weight. It's a good theory, and he stuck to it. Lunch was had at West Bexington, but a bit of an uncomfortable lunch. It was chilly and the wind was blowing. We got some sucker from watching a bit of a dysfunctional family. The mum was harassed and arguing with her naughty boy who was going far too close to some dangerous waves. Dad didn't appear to give a monkeys and walked off and left them to it. So that was mildly amusing. I finished my coffee and we tramped on for more of the Shingle slog. In time we found some firmer ground and up onto it we went, onto now a Jurassic mud. Lovely and sticky and gooey it was too. A real highlight here on the higher ground in a broad valley were the superb medieval farm terraces. Yet another testament to the hard physical lives that folk led back in those days. And the farm labourers, the peasants were put to task by the lord of the manor, no doubt, to dig out flat terrace features on the hill slopes to increase the cultivatable area, which they duly did. Strip lynchets they're called, and they're marked on the ordnance map, and these are mighty fine examples. Into Abbotsbury we went. Abbotsbury is a beautiful village, a place that puts the B in bucolic and the P in pastoral. I liked it very much. The golden stone looked marvellous, even on a drab day such as today. Technically we were due to be picked up here, but we'd sent a message to say we'd like to go on and do rather more of the walk today because we were feeling fit and full of it. And we didn't regret that decision at all, although the walking from after Abbotsbury was uninspiring, it has to be said. So on we walked. We didn't pay, I have to say, much attention to either the Abbey, apart from cracking jokes about being an abbot's house at school and stuff like that. And we didn't pay any attention at all to the swannery either, other than me telling Andy about that mute swans were manifold at the swannery, but it was also, much more importantly, the name of Emma and my favourite pub on Hampton Court Bridge, where we used to live, or near where we used to live. And that was a pub in which we hatched the idea of many a session of moving back to Bristol, which we duly did in 2018. One of the best decisions we ever made. Pubs are great places for hatching ideas, aren't they? More about that in another walk, I'm sure. We left Abbotsbury behind, very much enjoyed Chapel Hill and the chapel on top, that was glorious. But after that we had a long inland stretch which many a coast walker like us has walked along and thought probably to themselves, this don't feel very coastal, this bit, but you have to do it, and we got as much fun at it as we possibly could. We walked along a ridge which many a coast path walker has done before, and on the top of this ridge, probably a fault related structure, maybe an old shoreline feature, the path had been worn into the mud in the form of quite a deep rut, and I felt literally and metaphorically in the groove. And walking fans, that is my song for the day. It's a great song, real blues rocker. It was one that dates from their early days and was a concert standard. I think it was an opener for before they settled on the Immigrant Song and Heartbreakers, like a classic opening couplet of songs for many a year in the mid-70s. So In the Groove, Led Zeppelin, my song for the day. Time passed on this inland detour. We walked past some rather fetching woods. I had a banana and a cup of coffee, and we felt the pressure of time because Emma was due to pick us up at some point and I didn't want to keep her waiting. So we sort of scuttled along this section, didn't really take an awful lot in. And if I'm being brutally honest, there wasn't really a lot for us to get inspired by. Yes, we could see Chesil Beach in the distance. Yes, the hills are rolling and pleasant enough. And yeah, the Fleet is a lagoon, and once you've kind of walked along a bit of it, you've walked along a bit of it. I did enjoy getting down towards Herbury. I told Andy about the fossils there in the Jurassic muds and how collectible they were, although we had no time to do that. And I think the land is privately owned now anyway, and you can't get on it, which is annoying, but there you go, that's another story. We aimed for Moonfleet Manor. Both of us remembered reading the book Moonfleet when we were at school. We were forced to read it. It was a tale where buckles were swashed and plights were trothed and that sort of thing. Jack Trenchard, I think, was the hero, and either Blackbeard or Bluebeard features in it as pirate smugglers. So that kind of overwrought late Victorian, early 20th century writing, I think, is what it was all about. I don't remember much more about it other than an incredibly good black and white BBC TV adaptation of it, which I watched. I must have been pretty young, 6 or 7, but I remember it. And I remember it particularly because the two actors in it went on to become really famous. One for wearing a kilt in this programme. He was the sidekick of Doctor Who. And the two actors, Fraser Hines, the sidekick, and Patrick Troughton, I think the second ever television Doctor Who. So we talked a lot about Moonfleet whilst looking out for Emma in the trusty car, and we eventually spotted her across a few fields. We had to scamp around around a couple of fields, come off the coast path and meet up with her and get whisked away back to Eype. Andy at this point muttered words that became immortal, which were, "Never have I been so glad to see a Volkswagen." And so that was the end of our second ever, the 49th walk on our 54 walk itinerary that Andy and I did. And a cracker it was too. I have to say I enjoyed the cliff top sections more than I enjoyed the shingle slog, but it's all part of the experience, and what's not to like about a day on the coastal path? The answer is nothing. So here's to next time, walking fans, when we'll be doing the walk from Moonfleet Manor down to Ferrybridge, and then from Ferrybridge around the Isle of Portland, and from there on there ain't much more of the coast path for us to do to reach our end of the 630-mile adventure. I think in reality would have walked a lot further than the 630 official miles. That's it for now, walking fans. See you next time.